Hi, everybody. This is State Representative Roger Bruce, and welcome to this week's edition of Under the Gold Dome. We have as our guest this week Dr. Wayne Frazier. I'll let him, disclose who he really is if he wants to when he starts talking. But I know him in a variety of ways. But today we have invited him to be on to talk about education because that's his thing. He served in the Augusta school system for many, many years, and now he's on the school board. And we're going to be talking about what is education going to look like going forward, given all of the things that have happened where students have been at home learning. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to turn it over to Deborah Bazemore. She's got a topic that she's going to be telling you about. And then over to the senator, and then ultimately to my colleague, Derrick Jackson. Anything you guys like to say before we get started?
Just welcome back. Glad to be here with you again this Friday.
Deborah?
Welcome to all that have tuned in one more time on Friday. And happy Friday to everybody. Enjoy your day. Make it the best day ever.
All right. And I have no idea what Derrick is. So we're gonna skip Derrick until he finds his way back. He was there. That's his car, but I don't know where he is. But anyway, brother Wayne, you've been in the school system for how many years now?
Approximately 22 years.
22 years, and you served as principal in a high school. Is that correct?
A middle school, a high school, and an alternative school.
Okay, so you've been through the process, and then after you got through with all of that, you decided that you were going to run, and you won, and now you're on the school board.
That's right.
Is that correct?
Which
has nothing to do with that MARTA thing that he just. No. Okay, so given what has just taken place with the epidemic, and the fact that we've been teaching these children remotely. And we're continuing in many places to do that. We've had to change how we deliver the process. So what do you see? How do you see education going forward? What is the future of education?
Well,
given what we know.
I think that some of the things that we've had to do during this pandemic have taught us what what our strengths are in education. Our strengths as it relates to working with children that are homebound and can't get out of the house. We've learned there's a lot more we can do for our students. For instance, we are not, the things that we have learned, we are not going, some of it we won't go back to because it's positive as it relates to smaller class sizes.
This is State Representative.
We made a lot of progress with smaller class sizes. Now that was we had about half of our students going face to face, and the other half was virtual. The other part of this pandemic, it didn't have anything to do with the pandemic, so to speak, but one of the things that we are doing is we are going paperless and bookless. We're going to process, now this is all over the country really, that for the most part won't have to have textbooks to take home. Most of these books now going to be online, and they don't have to I guess drag these books back and forth to school. One of the areas that I am very happy about is the tutoring program that we have in place here in Augusta. As a grandparent, I have my 10-year-old son, grandson. I almost messed up 10-year-old son.
I'm sure you said, Glory know about that.
But my 10-year-old grandson, as a school board member with a doctorate degree, I caught more flack with this homework for for a fifth grader, and I just think about sometimes what the grandparents have to deal with that are, I would say, not uneducated, but undereducated, and working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, and they have 2 or 3 grandchildren in the home trying to help them.
Well, let me ask you something real quick, though. Because I don't want to run out of time before we get this question asked. Mm-hmm. Given that you have the responsibility for making sure that the schools are up to par, that the buildings are kept up, all that kind of stuff, it costs what, about $28-29 million to build a school. Build a school these days.
That's right.
If we can teach half these kids from home, we won't have to build as many school buildings. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. Matter of fact, I just talked about that at the last board meeting. And one thing I'm concerned about is we use this SPLOST money to build schools. And my exact words, we're building buildings that we don't need. Mm-hmm. And we are selling them or getting rid of them in less than 10 or 15 years. When we need to spend money on social emotional learning. Our children are suffering not just from this pandemic, but our children have been suffering a long time from social and emotional issues, and we need to put money in that that type of learning instead of these buildings. We got buildings here, schools with 2 and 3 gyms or whatever, and children walk in the school suffering and walk out the school in, excuse me for being graphic, but going to jail or to the graveyard, and they're not getting any help for the most part, for whatever reasons, at home, no help in the community, very little help in some of these schools. And the thing that I think is a pandemic is the social and emotional care of our children. And we are blaming the parents. And I'm talking about myself as a board member. We as board members, when we don't make progress, what our excuse is as board members is the parents' fault. These parents just don't care anymore. That's what some of us say. Or either the children are just too bad, you see. But what I see is in my community, in a way, the weakest link for our system is the board. We are not doing what we should be doing to move our system forward as it relates to helping our children and putting up programs in place, especially for that social emotional care of our children. Our children have everything they need as it relates to intelligence and smarts. They just don't have the right care as it relates to adults that's put in place to care for them. And I don't like to point fingers, but as a board member, I can't afford to point the finger at the parents. I can't afford to point the finger at the child because my job is to help them get to the next level, regardless of who the parents are or whatever. So pointing fingers is what we do when it comes to poor children. Now, children with resources, we're not going to point the finger. We're going to find a way to get those children the education, the one with resources.
Okay. Deborah or Sonya, you guys have a question you want to ask him?
So I just thank you. Mr. Frazier, thank you for bringing this to light, because I feel as though I've worked in a school district in New York, and I understand your frustration. And I believe that we, regardless of what climate or what the situation is that they come from, we have to be in tune with those children, because they're with us. When I was there, they're with you most of the day.
Right.
And so they rely on those that are there. They look to us to help them. And so I think, just like you said, when the resources are there, when we think outside the box to try to help them, we can do that. And I just want to say, I just had a mental health check-in with adults, but my objective also is to have one with students. because we continually have to check in with them and allow them a safe space to get out what's in and to be able to move and maneuver through their schoolwork and life and with other people. So thank you so much.
Well, let me say this. One of the things that people that I see every day, pastors and members of the community, some of them really don't have an idea that these children, the ones I talk to in media every day, do not have one caring adult in their lives. And it's hard to imagine a human being, especially a child, don't have not one person they can go to and talk to about how they feel and what's going on with them with education or anything. It seems that it seems too far-fetched to even think that way, but believe it or not, it's the truth. And it's many of our children is in that situation, and they don't have that. They don't have it at home. Not one caring adult or one person in the home that's effectively caring in a way, or and then they step outside the door, and this chaos outside the door in their community. They don't have it, and unfortunately, they come to school and don't have it.
Wayne, I don't want to cut you off, but I'm gonna cut you off because I want to make sure that Sonya gets her question in.
Well, I don't know that it's a question as much as a comment. I mean, one of the things that you said that's really, struck me is this part about the lack of adults, even in school, right? That children, young people can go to. And it just reminds me once again, there's always this talk around our investment in our schools, but even specifically around guidance counselors. And I think that in many across the state, a lot of our schools, the guidance counselors are really stretched in terms of the number of students that they're supposed to support. And that just helps to kind of exacerbate the problem that you've just laid out for us as well, as it relates to kids and somebody who's even noticing in a school, what is their mental health, right? Where are they just in their own minds and in their own heads?
Okay, Derrick, did you have anything you wanted to chime in on? He's on. Okay, there you go.
I do. So, and not much of a question, but I just want, for the sake of clarity, for our Under the Gold audience, when you think about the public education, because we're all products of public education, right? And when you think about the entire process, and I definitely don't want to point fingers because there's enough blame to go around, but unfortunately, from the school boards to state and even federal government, we believe, or we try to believe, that all schools are created, and that's not the case. If you look at Georgia, we got 159 counties, and each county has different needs. And it's important that we don't allow for the bean counters to simply just say, where can we cut here and there, without looking at the child as from a 360 perspective, mental health, wraparound services, making sure that we have enough guidance counselors in the school system to be able to help facilitate the needs of the child as well from a guidance, and make sure that teachers are paid accordingly. Make sure that the teacher retirement system is also solved. So it's not so much about building schools or the conundrum of, well, should we do distance learning versus in-person learning? No, because every child learns differently. Some are traditional learners. Some have the ability of being self-disciplined learners. So we're just going to be careful what we're advocating, because what may work in Fulton County may not work in Augusta or Columbus or Albany.
All right. Okay. Wayne, you get the last word. You got 30 seconds.
Okay.
I know you now. 30 seconds.
Okay. I would just say this. As I said earlier, in my situation, the school board is the weakest link for educating our children. That's what I believe. That's what I see. The next weakest link is the community. We have very little community engagement. How can you tell if the community engaged in educating our children? Look and see the educational institutions in other communities and where they have their schools, and look at our community and see where we have another choice for our children to go other than the public school. You cannot have, in my mind, you can't have a good McDonald's without having a Burger King somewhere close by. But with the public school system, it's the only game in town for poor people. So what we have to do, in my mind, is start putting some resources in some other areas of educating our children other than the public school. Because believe it or not, our children deserve another choice. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
And that choice is online and other forms that we've been talking about. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's a good choice, online. But if you look at these other religious institutions in other communities, a lot of their churches have K through 12 in their churches. And you look in our community, you have some kind of money-making organization, or babysitting, or something that way, you can make money, that kind of situation. That's one of the issues that we don't like to talk about, but that's a conversation we need to start having.
All right, well, we're going to have you back on, and we're going to have that conversation, okay?
Yeah.
What I want to do right now is say thank you for joining us. You're welcome to stay on and participate as we go forward. Who's going to go next? Is it Deborah? You want to go next?
I will. Right. Thank you, Representative Bruce. So I know that many of you probably today have heard about critical race theory. So there's a myth out there, though. There's all kinds of explanations of what this is, and people are getting their way wrong. So I just want to tell you what it says it is, and then we can have a discussion. So critical race theory, or CRT, the acronym, is an academic movement of civil rights scholars and activists in the United States who seek to critically examine the law as it intercepts with issues of race and to challenge mainstream liberal approaches to racial justice. Critical race theory examines social, cultural, and legal issues as they relate to race and racism. And I know we're short on time, so I'm gonna go down to this. Critical race theory is loosely unified by two common themes. First, that white supremacy exists and maintains power through the law. And second, that transforming the relationship between law and racial power, and also achieving racial emancipation, we talked about that last time, and anti-subordination more broadly are possible. So critics of critical race theory argue that it relies on social construct, evaluates storytelling or evidence and reason, and it rejects the concepts of truth and merit and opposes liberalization. So I heard that our governor is opposing this. Why would our governor be opposing the teaching of our history? Basically, that's what it is, our history in our schools. He also is fighting this and rejecting it. However, our President Joe Biden, is supporting this effort and is advocating for this to be put in our schools. I'm so glad we have Mr. Frazier, because they need to be taught our history and what the repercussions of what has been done to us has shown. But just last night, Cherokee schools decided that they will not have this taught in their school system.
Why do you think that's the case? Where do you think is the underlying factor?
Well,
I know the answer, but I want to know what your answer is.
as I looked at all the attendees, I did not see anyone in there that looked like me. Not one person. Therefore, there was no one there to advocate or to explain. And I think if there had been, they still would have been outnumbered.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think as a whole, we have people that do not want to revisit history and then the repercussions of what history has done to a certain segment, certain people.
Dr. Frazier, has that come up in your school system at all? Unmute.
I have personally brought up the curriculum around, I think it's 1619 program where it talks about where we come from and how we got to be where we are. And the reason why the question I think you asked was, why is it this way? In my opinion, I believe it's this way because you cannot have a thriving public school system, especially with African Americans, and at the same time have a thriving for-profit prison system. One of those systems has to fail for the other one to thrive. In our case, the school system is failing while the private for-profit prison is thriving. And the other thing, you can't control people. You cannot control our community if we understand who we are and where we come from. The dumber we are or the less educated we are about ourselves, the more we'll be able to go, they're able to continue to push us backwards. So in my mind, I think it's all in the plan to keep us in a certain way to be uninformed about who we are. That's my opinion in a way.
And the sad part about this too is that this originated in 1970. This is 2021, and we are still having this conversation. 1970s is when it originated. And then it was emerged as a movement by the 1980s. But we are still talking about this and trying to educate our children about this in 2021. And you have people fighting the effort. It's sad.
So it looks like Sonya's chomping at the bits.
Yeah. So a couple of things are just on this topic. So you've got nationally at the federal level, you've got a number of Republican House members who are proposing bills that would cut funding from schools that actually start to incorporate and build into the curriculum training around, race, and specifically that 1619 project, that New York, that Pulitzer Prize winning project is the, whatever reason, that's like galvanizing everybody kind of now in this moment around that. And the woman whose name, of course, I'm blanking on right now, which is terrible because she's incredible. She just was denied tenureship at the University of North Carolina, which is also causing its own ripples. So the university got a lot of pressure from conservatives and conservative-leaning groups to not tenure her, even though she sits in a chair where that chair is always a tenured position. And she passed, like, from whatever, it's a huge, long process. Whatever the process is she had to go through, they all came out, and the recommendation to the board of the university was to give her tenure. And the board has decided against it, and has, I don't, whatever. They're listening to all of the conservative pushback. It's happening as it relates to our schools, whether that's university level or, secondary and below. And it's also happening in the military, where you've also got some folks doing bills that are anti this CRT training in the military, anti kind of racial sensitization in the military. So it's a huge pushback that we're seeing across kind of sectors, and I don't know where, but for whatever reason, it seems to have generated a lot of fear that people are actually kowtowing to.
Yeah, is it possible? We try to talk not so much in riddles, but we trying to be polite. I mean, it's the bottom line to this, that there's been a race of people that have historically been pretty mean to other racial groups, and as such, they don't want all of that exposed. They don't want it to be known, all of the things that they've done, from slavery, all the way, to now, all of the racial imbalance that we've experienced, and the financial, there's a reason why Black people die at an earlier age than white people. There's a reason why the financial ability of Black people is different than that of white people. There's a reason why healthcare is not as accessible to Black people as it is to white people. There's a reason for all of that. But I think, Deborah, and you correct me if I'm wrong, what you were saying is that they don't want this to be taught because they don't want nobody to know what happened. Is that
exactly?
It's that, right. But it's also, they don't want, like, I think it was Mitch McConnell who said in his statement, they don't want, they're trying to reject the notion that institutionalized racism exists in this country. Because they're saying, then that's saying this is an inherently racist country.
Right.
And that for them is contrary to all the greatness of this country. Right. So.
And that's why they would have to admit that. And when you admit something, then you have to do something about it. That's right. Because you admit it and then walk away. No. Right. You then have to do something about it. And also the woman, and I forgot her name.
It's Nicole Yvette Durham. Thank you. It's Nicole Hannah Jones.
Yes. And they were talking about it today on The View, actually. And the school tried to say that she accepted not to accept it this time. However, it's going to take her 5 years now to apply again. 5 more years to apply again, so they can sweep this issue under the rug. And that's what they continue to do. Just sweep it under the rug. If it's something bad, let's sweep it under the rug. And I know my colleague's going to talk about January 6th. Let's stop talking about this. Sweep it under the rug. It's a done deal. We don't have to discuss it anymore. Anything that's bad and shines a light on how the treatment was and what needs to be done, they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. It's sad, it's a reality, but if, like to your point earlier, if you don't admit that there's a problem, then you can't, start the process of resolving whatever that problem is.
That's right.
And but I think, we have to be willing, all of us, myself and all of us, we have to be willing to talk about this ourselves. We don't want to talk about it either, but we're going to have to learn how to be candid in the conversation and not, make it look pretty or whatever. We have to be very specific so that there's no doubt in the mind of those that we're talking to what we're saying as we go forward. Deborah, you get the last word on this.
I just think, like you said, more conversation needs to take place. We need to be more vigilant ourselves about bringing it forward, telling our children and our children's children, if it takes that, and making sure we educate. Because a lot of schools They don't teach, even up north where I went to, they're not going to teach you about your history. We have to be
That's right.
determined and deliberate about teaching this to all of our children, even adults, because if you don't know, you cannot advocate for fairness and equity.
Deborah, you know, one last question for you though. If we can't get this done through the school system, what's the alternative? How do we get it done? Because we still need to educate people about what we're talking about. And if we can't get it done through the schools, what's the next best route?
I think we as legislators, we have an avenue that most people don't, and an advantage that we can come together as one, and we can also individually in our districts have different forums, put the information out, invite people to learn, and just let them know what the truth is. Because like when I started this subject, I said there are so many people, and I mean elected officials in DC and all over, that are touting that this is something other than what it really is. And so we need the truth, and we need to arm our children. And once you're armed with it, you can go far and do things further.
We've gone through two great topics, and now we're going on to a third. Senator?
Well, do you want to do, because I think Representative Jackson, if he's ready, because
Are you ready?
Because I think Representative Bazemore made the point that, you know,
Derrick, are you ready?
to.
He's on mute.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right.
So, and I appreciate Representative Bazemore talking about CRT, because another part of bringing historical context to this conversation is
okay. You're on mute some kind of way. Your speaker's not working. Your mic is not working.
Uh-oh.
We can't hear you.
Derrick, we can't hear you. He's just talking, but we can't.
He doesn't know that we can't hear him.
Derrick, we can't hear you.
We probably can't hear y'all neither.
Yeah, that's what it looks like, maybe.
Okay.
I'll text him.
Yeah. And we can flip to me. Okay.
Yeah, we got to come back to him.
Okay. So mine is a much lighter topic. And so, and really it's more informational than anything else. I just, as a reminder, right, back in March, the American Rescue Plan was passed and signed into law. That's a historic $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill. These numbers are so big, they're almost hard to, kind of even imagine. But that bill is a pandemic rescue plan. So that's meant to deliver relief for working families, while also extending support for our states, our cities, to get us through the pandemic and the subsequent economic fallout that we've experienced because of the pandemic. So according to the projections, that bill results in $17.4 billion to Georgia, which includes state and local governments and individual assistance. And then to break that down just a little bit further, Georgia will receive $4.7 billion in state fiscal relief, an additional $3.8 billion in education, and another $3.6 billion in local fiscal relief. The governor has said that he is intending to create a committee or multiple committees, none of those have been named yet, and seek input and that those committees will ultimately make recommendations to him for how the state relief dollars should be spent. Separately, the Biden administration has also unveiled the American Jobs Plan, That is a $2.6 trillion investment that seeks to rebuild America's infrastructure. So this kind of infrastructure plan has been proposed by the last two presidents, quite honestly, and they've had bold plans that really never got very far. The difference this time may be that President Biden also has proposed a way to pay for the investment. And mostly that's been through raising corporate taxes, new taxes on international commerce, as well as a repeal of those Trump tax cuts that were delivered in 2017. So while the U.S. Congress still needs to draft and finalize the legislative text that would accompany that plan, many of those proposals definitely have the potential to really seriously impact positively county-owned or supported infrastructure in sectors that range from transportation to drinking water in our water systems, community development, public housing, public schools, and broadband. Which the broadband piece, I think, actually really ties nicely into the first conversation we had around our schools. But in honor of the fact that Secretary of Transportation, Mayor Buttigieg, is visiting in Atlanta today and in East Point, which happens to be represented by myself, Representative Bazemore, and Representative Jackson, I thought that I would just have a very quick conversation about public transportation and talk a little bit about MARTA. And then there's a call to action that I have for you all as well. But, you know, public transportation includes the buses, light rail, subway, streetcars and trolleys, van pool services, and MARTA, which is our system, happens to be the 12th largest U.S. transit system in the country, with 38 rail stations. And the Secretary Buttigieg, he was visiting in East Point because he was looking at a very specific project that is happening there that's very exciting. I think the trip to East Point was one of the first, if not the first, visits that he's made to kind of small towns, for lack of a better word. And so I know that he was really excited about that, and we all were excited to have him come and to be able to welcome him and show him the great stuff that's happening in our backyard. But MARTA's got the 38 rail stations, 338 rail cars, 570 buses, 450,000 people ride on MARTA every day. And each year, it's got 7.9 million annual riders. And there's no question that MARTA will continue to be a really important part of what makes our metro region dynamic. And it's important. Public transportation across the country is a way to boost economic development in a way. I mean, certainly workforce development. If people can get to where they need to get to work, that's an advantage. Right. So as part of the American Jobs Program, $85 billion is going to be used to upgrade and expand our public transit systems. MARTA is predominantly funded through the federal government. It's also got a local tax that generates dollars for it. And we here in Georgia, interestingly, we're one of the only, we may be the only state that doesn't actually subsidize our public transportation system. This year in the legislature, for the first time, dollars were directly allocated to MARTA. And I have to say, I'm super excited about that. I think I might have been the only person in the Senate who really requested and actively advocated for that $6 million to go to MARTA. That money is going to be used specifically for an expansion of their Bankhead station. They're going to move from 2 cars to 4 cars. And of course, Bankhead is the westernmost terminus. It's the end of that green line. So they're taking it from the 2 cars to the 4 cars. That's going to spur a lot of growth in that area. Microsoft, of course, is also coming to that area because of the Quarry project. And Microsoft had said that it wants 50% of its workforce to be able to get to work by public transportation. So here's where the call to service, the call to action comes in for everybody listening. MARTA is looking to do a redesign of their bus network, as you see there. And let me just pull up and tell you a little bit more about that. Ultimately, they are trying to decide what routes may be changed. Is the bus network working the way that it is currently conceived? Where and should bus service travel and how frequently? How should the service run on weekends or at night? Should some locations get new service or additional service? And how are the connections made among buses and between buses and trains? So this is a project that is happening now, and their goal is to finalize this by the end of 2021. And as part of the process, they are going to be looking to the public and doing public hearings to help them figure out what the proposed changes should actually be. And so this is the part that I wanted to make sure all of you knew about, is the public engagement piece. And you can participate in this process by visiting. I'm going to figure out how to put this online. There's a project website. It's marta.com/bus network that you can visit. They have board meetings, and the board work sessions are every second Thursday at noon. A board meeting follows at 1:30. So you could join a work session, and public comments are accepted up to 1 p.m. on the day of the board meeting. I'm going to give you a phone number. You can leave your question, comment, or concern at 404-848-5299. And so this is more informational than anything. Just want you to know that this work is happening right now, and MARTA's reimagining their bus network. And we have an opportunity as constituents and people who use the service to weigh in and help them figure out how we can make it the best that it can be and serve us the way that we need it to serve us.
Well, that's good. That's real good information. MARTA is important to our economy. I remember when MARTA first came into existence. Our buses, a lot of people don't know this, but the buses used to be run by the Georgia Power Company. And then MARTA came in back in the 70s. And it was opened up to 9 counties, but only 2 chose to get involved with MARTA. And, it was kind of a weird thing. We were talking earlier about how racism and the issue of color gets involved in just about everything. Back then, most of the surrounding counties did not want MARTA because they associated MARTA with Black people being able to get into their community. Mm-hmm. And, it was kind of weird because they thought that Black people were going to get on the bus, come into their neighborhood, steal their TV, and then get back on the bus and leave with it. But we laugh, but that's really what it was. But anyway, Deborah, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say or Derrick, before we move on and try to get back to what Derrick was saying.
Yeah, so it was excellent information, and I'm going to yield to my colleague because I want to hear what he has to say. We only have a little bit of time left.
Derrick, did you straighten it out?
So technology and broadband, I'm glad that, my topic sort of intersect all the topics that we talked about today, because from an infrastructure, we need broadband. And you can't talk about teaching children or through a distant learning or virtual learning without broadband. Can't do telemedicine without broadband. And so we need infrastructure in Georgia. But going back to the other point, and I'm glad Representative Bazemore raised the topic about CRT, because when you think about what took January 6th, January 6th was an insurrection, period, end of story. And so when you can't tell the truth about the history, Now they're trying to revise the present so that the history doesn't reflect what truly occurred. And the insurrection is probably the most egregious example when you see a major party that's trying to revise what took place. I mean, we have a sitting elected senior Republicans who ousted one of their other senior leaders because she was trying to tell the truth about what happened about the insurrection and this big lie. And so my 3 points around the insurrection, because we teach our children that there are consequences when you lie. That's number one. What are we teaching our children when it comes to telling the truth and what is factual and what is fiction? Number two, it gravely impacts our democracy, right? We're a two-party system, right? I want a strong system, opposing party, but you can't have a conversation about healthcare and infrastructure if you can't tell the truth on when the United States Capitol was attacked by domestic terrorists. And then number three, and I would love to open it up for commentary, and that is this. Our election system is designed for every citizen to be able to have a sense of confidence. So we cannot talk about public education or any other form of education. We can't talk about democracy if our citizens do not have access to ballot box. And they have to have confidence that their government is doing the right thing to ensure that their vote is counted. And so, because of the insurrection, because of the lie, we see what's happening in Arizona. I continue to get emails, and I'm sure you all get emails as well, talking about they want to do another audit in Georgia. We've done 3, and these audits are expensive. They're not cheap. We completed 3 in the federal courts. Judges, both Republicans and Democrats, said that there's no evidence of fraud, 0 evidence of fraud, and the few evidence of fraud, maybe 2, there were Republicans. This one man is currently in jail because he killed his wife, signed her absentee ballot, and submitted her absentee ballot, right? And this absentee ballot was for 45. So there are instances that occurred, but nowhere close to the magnitude that Republicans are stating that we need Senate Bill 202 around election integrity and election security. So that's my topic around us telling the truth and look at the insurrection and looking at this big lie and how it ties in to everything that we've been talking about, from public education to infrastructure, all the things that our citizens demand for us to do. If we cannot come to a consensus on what took place on January 6th, I just find it difficult for us to do anything else.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly, and it is sad that we have to continue to try to educate people and convince people that there was definitely an insurrection, because they want you to believe that what you saw, your eyes were lying to you. Your eyes are lying to you. We watched this. People's lives were in jeopardy, their own lives. This is what baffles me, is that some of those legislators, their lives were in jeopardy, but they turned around and support the lie. Why is that? Because they're in fear. When you are afraid, you do anything. And they believe that if they do not stand with 45, they will be out of office. It's about power and money. And just like you said, it all ties in because we saw how they dealt with those peaceful protesters that were out there with the Black Lives Matter. They came with force. They were intentional, but this they allowed to happen because they did not look like us. And it was okay. Go ahead, Senator.
I was going to say that's true, but it's real. I mean, it's sad, unfortunate when members, when folks who are in the Republican Party are willing to step up and say something, they are no longer really welcome in that party. Right. I mean, we are seeing that even here in our own state. You've got a Secretary of State, you've got a lieutenant governor and a governor at the beginning, right, who all three of them following November's election said this was the most secure election. This was a fair election. There was no fraud. All three of them said that. You've got now the lieutenant governor who's decided not to run for re-election, and he had been consistently public around the fact that he did not think that this was the right approach and that really what the Republican Party needed was leadership. That is what he is on record saying. Right. You've got the Secretary of State who is being censured by the county parties throughout the state because they feel like he did not uphold his constitutional duty by a number of things. I'm still getting emails every day demanding that I do my job and that we pull paper ballots and do an audit. I mean, you've got nationally Liz Cheney, right, who just this week, highest ranking Republican woman, who was stripped of her committee chairmanships because she has consistently said that this is that the way that the story, it's being framed completely wrong. She's not willing to support that big lie, and she is being punished for it. So it's sad because when the Republicans who are willing to say what is right have said it, well, they have definitely had ramifications. And then what does that teach all the rest of them? It teaches them to just sit down and shut up, particularly if you want to keep your job or have the support of the party to keep your job.
Right.
Wayne, were you trying to say something?
Yes, I got to get out. I appreciate everything. I wish I could be a part of these kind of conversations in my community because lack of communication in my communities was killing our children because we don't communicate effectively with each other. It's not the children, but our communication. I just like to say also for us to think about developing some type of an agenda around educating our children in the state of Georgia and come up with an agenda with some issues on it, like why we don't have Black men in the schools. I know why, but there's a lot of reasons that we can work on. The other thing is having a culturally relevant curriculum. Our children are forced with this curriculum that don't have anything to do with them or where they come from. And equity concerns. We have equity concerns. They think money gonna buy everything. They gave me $2 million. I didn't need no $2 million in my school. I just needed the right kind of people in front of the children. They gave me anything and anybody off the street to put in front of our children, and then $2 million to appease me. But I didn't need that money. I just need the right people, but no one to help me with those kind of issues. So I think we need to have more conversations and some action around education. So if you can think about coming up with an agenda, a committee where we can just talk about education and start doing something in these communities, I definitely would appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, sir.
Derrick, let's go back to you.
Yes. So, and I appreciate Dr. Frazier's inputs on that. But again, going back to the topic, when you're thinking about simple things such as right and wrong, right? Truth, right, versus lie. It is the bedrock of our society. If I cannot trust you because you are lying, right, that impacts not just the political world, not just the public education world, it impacts everything, right? Everything is part of our society, right? How we negotiate, how do we reach consensus? And so it's a travesty as a retired military officer. It's a travesty that we have men and women right now fighting for a democracy that doesn't look like a democracy, right? If you look at, I mean, we have Republicans, senior Republicans, as was already mentioned by Senator Halpern and Representative Bazemore, at federal level and state level. They're twisting themselves in knots. And we can put the video up and say, hey, right after January 6th, this is what you said. And then yesterday, 2 months later, this is what you said. It's mind-boggling.
Derrick, do you think that there's a bigger issue that nobody seems to be talking about? You know, the fact that they are just outright lying, and anyone can see that they're lying. That the agenda is not about, you know, what's going on right now. It's about something in the future that requires them to get their people, their membership tuned into how do we control the government? How do we stay in power, even though we're not the majority? I really think that's what's going on. You know, I think they want the United States to look like, you know, South Africa used to look. You know, where they were in the minority, but they were still the majority ruling. I think that's what's going on.
No, that's exactly what's going on. And we, as Democrats, right, we have to be mindful that Republicans always focus on the long play, right? If you look at Mitch McConnell, he knew exactly what he wanted to do while President Obama was president. Right? They always look at the long play. The Supreme Court is a long play. The judicial system is a long play. That's how you stay in power and how you redistrict lines. We have to be ready this fall because that's another way, that tool that they've used, to your point, Representative Bruce, to marginalize the voice so they can remain in power. So you're absolutely right.
And that's one thing, Representative Jackson, that I have said, I've noticed years ago, that we are reactive. We don't get together and strategize. We don't have a strategy, like you say, for the long haul, down the road. And we know if we do this, this is going to happen, and then we can keep control. And I talk about that when the Democrats were in control and got comfortable. Just thought that was the way it was going to be forever. But the whole time, the Republicans were strategizing. They had a strategy, they put it in place, and then the results are, we are now in the minority, and we are trying to get back to where we were before. And so I do, however, have to applaud those in leadership right now, because there's a whole different mindset. And so we have come together and working together and strategizing. So I implore everybody that's listening, please make sure that you vote, that you're registered. Don't take it for granted. Don't think because you were registered that you are. Please make sure you are.
All right. Any last words, Senator, before we wrap up?
No.
All right.
No, great topics, and they're all really important. I mean, the truth of the matter is, right, we are in this push-pull moment, and you know, there's a lot on the line. And so the decisions that each of us as individuals, and then certainly those of us on this line who are legislators, the decisions we make, all of us together, are going to matter. And it is going to take an entire community if we're going to want to make sure that we have the things that we need in the ways that we need them, and that we protect this democracy, and that the United States is able to function in the way that maybe it wasn't intended to, but the way that it meets its ideals and the values that we espouse.
All right. Derrick, last words.
I just want to encourage our audience, our Under the Gold Dome audience, to please share this information. We try to bring you relevant and impactful topics to discuss. You can share what we discussed in these last 55 minutes with others, so we can continue to have this conversation.
All right.
Go to voteDerrickJackson.org. VoteDerrickJackson.org.
Okay. Well, we're out of time. And I want to thank my guest. He's gone now, but thank him anyway. Wayne Frazier, and my co-host, Derrick. We're gonna have to find a way to get you stabilized, so that that everybody can benefit from all the good information that you have. And I know the journey that you're on. We're gonna all be joining you on that journey, but we got to figure out a way to stabilize you, okay? And to my two lady co-hosts, you guys bring a lot to this program, and I appreciate you very much for what you bring to it. And to our audience, we thank you very much. We hope that you are getting good information from us, and that you'll join us again next week. Where?
Under the Gold Dome.
Dome.
All right. Take care.
Bye, everybody.